We all strive for self-improvement, don't we? That sort of persistent nudge to become a better version of ourselves, to live more fully, maybe grow a bit. But what if that journey, which often feels kind of nebulous, guided by intuition, could be mapped out, like with the precision of a GPS? Imagine having a data-driven compass for your inner world, showing you exactly how to navigate towards, well, your ideal self. Today, we're diving deep into a concept that promises just that: personality vectoring. It's a really fascinating, pretty forward-looking idea proposed by researcher Tom Counsell, and it's grounded in cutting-edge AI, specifically large language models, but it's also married with some really profound psychological understanding.
That's exactly right. And our material for this deep dive, it comes straight from the source. We're looking at 3 detailed essays from Tom Counsell, all just published this week, actually, June 21, 2025. So our mission today is basically to unpack this novel approach. We want to understand its technical side, appreciate the psychological relevance, which is huge, and also really consider its implications, for how we understand and maybe even pursue personal growth. And for you, the listener, knowing you likely have a keen interest in psychology and maybe some technical grounding, this is perfect territory for us to explore together.
All right, okay. Let's unpack this then. Let's plot our course. To really get our heads around personality vectoring, we probably need to start with 2 sort of foundational concepts. First, how these large language models, LLMs, how they actually organize information in what they call vector space. And second, how psychology, well, for centuries really, has wrestled with this complex, dynamic idea of the self. It's where these 2, seemingly separate fields collide that things get really interesting.
It really is a fascinating convergence. Think about LLMs like BERT or, the models derived from GPT technology. When they process text, it could be single words, whole sentences, even big documents, they embed them, which just means they transform these abstract ideas into high-dimensional numerical representations. We call them vectors. You can almost picture these vectors as like precise coordinates. Think latitude and longitude, but in this enormous semantic space, basically a map of meaning. And on this map, every word, every concept has its own unique spot. And things with similar meanings, they're literally parked closer together. It's how these models start to understand complex relationships. Like that famous example, if you take the vector for king, mathematically subtract the vector for man, and then add the vector for woman, the result gets you remarkably close to the vector for queen. It's almost like a kind of linguistic arithmetic, math with meaning.
Wow, okay. That king man plus woman queen example really helps clarify how they grasp relationships. But okay, taking that leap to personality, isn't personality just way more nuanced, more subjective than, dictionary definitions? How can we be sure these language shifts really capture the depth of real psychological change?
There's a crucial question, absolutely. And that's where psychology really comes into play. This whole concept builds very directly on a long-standing idea called the lexical hypothesis. Basically, it suggests that the most important personality traits, the ones that really matter and how we differ, they get encoded in our language, in the words we use to describe ourselves and others. And this isn't some brand new idea either. The actual development of the big 5 personality traits, openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism, they came from analyzing adjectives. Which ones tended to cluster together in dictionaries? The thinking was, if a trait was significant, language would find a word for it.
Right, okay. And the sources mention LLMs can now predict these big 5 traits from just text with, over 80% accuracy? That feels pretty significant. It suggests a pretty strong, quantifiable link between how we use language and these measurable personality traits.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
And it goes beyond just static traits. This concept also ties in really deeply with something called narrative identity theory, which emphasizes that we don't just have an identity, we actively construct it. Through the ongoing stories we tell about our lives, our experiences, think about exercises like the best possible self, where you write out your ideal future. Personality vectoring, in essence, quantifies the semantic distance between your current story, who you are now, and that ideal one you described. It's about mapping where your narrative is versus where you want it to head.
So it's not just snapshots of traits. It's about the dynamic, evolving story, who we are, who we want to become, the ongoing authorship of our own lives. That's a really powerful way to frame it.
Exactly. And you see support for this dynamic view in established therapeutic models, too. Take internal family systems, IFS. It sees identity not as one single thing, but as multiple parts, almost like an inner committee guided towards a core self. Or schema therapy, which it focuses on shifting people away from dysfunctional patterns, these modes, towards healthier ones. Both support this idea of a changeable identity. So personality vectoring offers a kind of computational parallel to track and maybe even guide these shifts within that semantic map of meaning. It gives us a mathematical way to look at those internal narrative changes.
Okay, so we've covered how LLMs map meaning and how psychology sees identity as this dynamic story. But this takes us from just understanding the map to actually, plotting a course on it. If we have these precise coordinates for who you are now and coordinates for who you want to be, how do we find the exact path between them? And this is where Tom Counsell's proposal really gets interesting, with what he calls the delta vector.
You're spot on. This is where the theory becomes a practical tool. Counsell's core idea is elegant, really. You represent your current self and your ideal self as distinct vectors, specific points in that high-dimensional semantic space. The method involves embedding various forms of your self-description. Maybe it's journal entries, maybe written narratives, maybe even just spontaneous speech captured over time. From that, the system derives a unique current self vector. Think of it as capturing the semantic fingerprint of who you are right now. And similarly, your aspirational narrative statements like, I want to speak up confidently in group settings, or I wish I were more adventurous, those get embedded to form an ideal self vector. That's the target, who you aspire to be.
Right. And then the system computes this delta vector. So this isn't just spotting the start and end points, it's mapping the direction in semantic terms, like getting a personalized trajectory for growth.
Precisely. The delta vector is simply the mathematical difference between that ideal self vector and your current self vector. This vector, this delta, it literally encapsulates the semantic changes needed for your personal growth. So for instance, if your current self-description includes phrases like, I often feel shy, and your ideal self is confident and outgoing, that delta vector quantifies that specific shift. It defines both the direction and the sort of magnitude of the change needed in your internal narrative in the way you use language about yourself.
That's the real power, isn't it? So the LLMs are then fine-tuned using that specific delta vector for you to generate personalized prompts and guidance. And it measures progress using cosine similarity, which is just how aligned your new language patterns are getting to your ideal self's language.
That's it exactly. Cosine similarity is just a measure of how close two vectors are pointing in the same direction in that high-dimensional space. 0 degrees apart means perfect alignment.
Okay, got it. Like checking how close two compass needles are to pointing the same way.
Exactly. And the sources provide some solid empirical backing for this whole idea. We already mentioned the high accuracy in predicting big five traits from text that confirms the language psychology link. But even more compelling, perhaps, is how researchers can observe semantic drift in things like time-stamped journal entries. You can actually see people's language patterns shifting over time in response to therapy or major life events. This suggests these language shifts do reflect real underlying psychological changes. And that king man plus woman queen idea, the analogical reasoning in vector space, it hints that this vector math can potentially model personality change. And Counsell mentioned some early trials showing that if you interpolate along these transformation vectors, you can actually generate coherent, believable, intermediate personality profiles, sort of plotting gradual steps towards the ideal self. We're even starting to understand the potential neurobiological links, with brain networks like the default mode network being crucial for self-reflection and narrative identity, and of course neuroplasticity underpinning our ability to change.
So we've got the science, the math, but how does this actually work for someone? For you, the listener, how does this abstract idea become a practical tool? Counsell imagines something surprisingly, intimate and accessible. A voice-based conversational interface. Picture interacting with the system just over a standard phone line. No app needed. This allows it to capture your spontaneous speech, maybe even pick up on subtle cues in your tone, potentially encouraging more natural self-disclosure than just typing text. And the whole process is structured into 5 distinct steps.
Right. The first step is baseline assessment. The system listens to you talk naturally, analyzes your speech patterns, word choices, the themes that come up. And from that, it infers your current self vector. That's your starting point on the map.
Okay, step 1. Where am I now? Then step 2 is goal articulation. This is where you talk about who you want to be.
Exactly. You describe your desired qualities, maybe the situations you want to handle differently. This aspirational narrative gets embedded to form your target vector, your destination on the growth map.
Got it. Start point, end point.
Yeah.
And the step 3 must be
delta computation. This is where the system calculates that precise transformation vector we talked about. The specific road between your current and ideal self, mathematically defined. This delta vector is what customizes the conversation that follows.
Okay, and step 4 is conversational vectoring. This is where the AI actually guides you.
Precisely. Using that unique delta vector, a fine-tuned LLM doesn't just give generic advice. It selects very specific, tailored questions, reflections, maybe even topic transitions. They're designed specifically to nudge your language and hopefully, therefore, your mindset towards your stated goals. So, if your delta vector points from shy towards confident, the AI might ask, describe a recent time you hesitated to speak. How might your ideal confident self have approached that? Or maybe, tell me about a time you did feel confident. What did that feel like? It's all about gently encouraging those semantic shifts through focused conversation.
And the last step.
Step 5 is continuous calibration. As you respond, your answers are re-embedded in real time. The system constantly measures your progress, those shifts in cosine similarity, how aligned you're becoming with your ideal vector. This allows the AI to dynamically adapt its guidance. Maybe it speeds up, maybe it slows down, maybe it shifts focus, always adjusting based on your movement towards that ideal state. It's like a GPS constantly recalculating your route based on where you actually are.
Wow. This idea of a semantic compass for personal growth, it's incredibly compelling. What do you see as the biggest opportunities this could unlock for individuals, but also maybe for mental health professionals?
Yeah, that's the really exciting part, the potential benefit. The optimistic view is that personality vectoring could genuinely reshape how psychologists and therapists support personal growth. Imagine a therapist assigning this semantic compass for check-ins between sessions. Instead of just relying on subjective recall weeks later, the therapist could see data, see how language patterns are shifting, or maybe where someone's getting stuck. This could allow for hyper-personalized adjustments in the next therapy session. It offers a data-driven, quantifiable way to enhance interventions, providing real-time guidance that could powerfully complement traditional therapy.
And the potential reach seems huge, right? Far beyond just the clinical setting. Thinking about the millions of people just looking to optimize their lives, maybe do some self-coaching, or even get early support for well-being, this could be a real game changer.
Absolutely. The impact on personal development, self-coaching platforms, even preventative mental wellness tools, it could be significant. But, and this is crucial, Counsell is very clear that with such powerful tools come really significant ethical and philosophical considerations. It's a tool. And like any powerful tool, it demands extremely careful handling and responsible development.
Right. And honestly, my first thought goes to, isn't there a risk of reductionism? Boiling down the rich, complex, interpretive nature of who someone is to just numbers, or this data fetishism, prioritizing quantitative measures over just lived human experience. These feel like really vital concerns.
They absolutely are. And Counsell tackles them directly in the essays.
Yeah.
He emphasizes that autonomy is paramount. The AI has to serve as a compass, not a commander. The user must retain full control, the ability to pause, to modify their goals, to say, no, that's not right. And privacy, especially using sensitive voice data, that's absolutely critical. It requires robust technical protections, transparency, and fully informed consent. Build and trust is key, ensuring the user always feels in charge of their own journey, their own destination.
So the idea isn't the AI telling you who to be. It's more like it reflects your own inner landscape back to you, helping you articulate and then navigate towards your self-defined ideal. It actually sounds a lot like Carl Rogers' old idea of congruence, right? Bringing the real self and ideal self closer together. The tech is just a tool for that self-discovery.
That is the absolute key takeaway. The vision is firmly for the human to stay in the driver's seat, with the AI acting as a sophisticated, responsive tool. And importantly, for complex psychological needs, the system would be designed to escalate to human professionals. It's about complementing expertise, not replacing it. The roadmap Counsell outlines for this involves rigorous validation studies first. Think small pilot studies, maybe 10, 15 people, carefully tracking vector shifts alongside traditional measures like Big Five scores and subjective well-being reports to make sure it actually works in the real world. It also involves developing open-source tools that's important for fostering wider research and collaboration and assembling genuinely interdisciplinary teams. You need psychologists, AI researchers, ethicists, all working together to draft guidelines for responsible development.
That interdisciplinary collaboration feels absolutely essential, making sure it's developed responsibly, probably with a health professional in the loop somewhere for monitoring, and ensuring it genuinely serves human well-being rather than, falling into traps like oversimplification or letting the tech dictate things.
It's a clear call for that kind of careful, collaborative R&D. A journey from these initial essays, these white papers, towards a potentially helpful real-world tool. It really represents a promising synthesis, blending computational rigor with narrative depth and, crucially, ethical integrity. By combining that scientific precision with humanistic wisdom, this deep dive shows us how AI could potentially serve as a thoughtful, scientifically grounded companion in, well, the authorship of your own evolving story.
So we've navigated this intricate landscape of personality vectoring, from its roots in psychology and LLM vector spaces through its potential application as a voice-based guide, and into its really promising yet, yes, ethically complex future.
It's definitely a powerful idea. The possibility of quantifying personal growth to provide a tangible map for self-improvement, but always emphasizing that identity remains deeply personal, something continuously authored by you.
So thinking about all this, what stands out to you? How might having access to a kind of semantic compass change the way you think about or maybe even pursue your own personal transformation?